The wind howls low through a glacial valley, scouring the land like a knife. Snow drifts pile up against black boulders and dead trees, and just barely visible in the white haze, a glow, a flicker of orange. Firelight. Around it huddle 8 figures. Their bodies are squat and powerful, wrapped in stitched animal hides. Their faces are broad, with heavy brows and wide noses red from the cold. These are Neanderthals, and they are not camping. They are surviving. This is Europe, roughly 60,000 years ago, during the Würm glaciation. In many parts of the continent, average temperatures dipped below freezing for months at a time. Forests were sparse, the air was dry, and food was far from guaranteed. In this unforgiving landscape, modern humans, Homo sapiens, would have struggled. But Neanderthals, they were sculpted by it. Archaeological sites like La Faraci in France and Krapina in Croatia show just how entrenched these hominins were in the Ice Age world. They built wind shelters from mammoth bones, dug into permafrost for warmth, and clustered in caves that reeked of soot and sweat. But even in those strongholds, survival wasn't promised. At the heart of each camp, fire. But it wasn't always roaring. Unlike us, who can flick a lighter or strike a match, Neanderthals may have relied on pyrite and flint, needing dry tinder that could be hard to find. When flames died, everything changed. Fire gave them heat, cooked their food, and kept night predators at bay. Without it, exposure could kill in hours. And then, there's the silence. In a modern winter, we retreat indoors, drowning discomfort in central heating and streaming content. In the Ice Age, the silence of snowfall could mean isolation, starvation, or death. No neighbors to help. No backup generator. A curious find at the Mezmeskaya cave in Russia revealed the body of a Neanderthal child, curled tight and alone. Some scientists think the group abandoned the cave during a cold snap. Others wonder if the child had been left, deliberately. Scholars still debate whether Neanderthals understood the seasons or simply endured them. But one thing is clear, this was no world for the unprepared. If you or I stepped into this camp, even for a short visit, our lungs might seize from the cold. Our soft boots would fail. Our modern metabolism, shaped by comfort, couldn't burn enough calories fast enough. Within 48 hours, your fingers would blacken. The fire would demand fuel. The wind would find you, and the snow would not stop falling. Step closer to that fire and you'd smell it before you saw it. A bubbling mass of marrow and meat, boiling in a stone-lined pit or searing on a spit of scavenged wood. This was not cuisine, this was chemistry. Calories over flavor, survival over satisfaction. Neanderthals were expert butchers. From the bones of woolly rhinos and reindeer, they stripped every usable gram of muscle, sinew, and tendon. But it wasn't the lean cuts they prized most, it was the fat. In freezing conditions, fat isn't just food, it's fuel. High lipid marrow from long bones and brains from smashed skulls offered dense energy. Without enough fat, even with a belly full of meat, a person could starve. This is called rabbit starvation, a real risk when prey animals are too lean. At sites like Goyet Cave in Belgium, butcher marks on bones suggest systematic processing, including cracked femurs for marrow. In some layers, human bones were broken the same way. Whether out of ritual or desperation, cannibalism remains a disturbing, documented thread. Some argue it was survival cannibalism. Others propose something darker: punishment, warfare, or disease control. The bones don't say. Now imagine yourself in this camp watching a Neanderthal woman crack open a caribou tibia with a river stone. She works with speed and practiced grace, but not delicacy. Splatters of blood stain the snow. You're cold, hungry, and nauseated. Would you eat? The gut contents of frozen mammoths and woolly rhinos show they consumed vast quantities of fibrous vegetation. Neanderthals ate them. But they weren't purely carnivores. Plant residues on ancient Neanderthal teeth, like those at El Cedron in Spain, suggest a surprising range: pine nuts, mushrooms, even cooked barley. Still, plants were seasonal, and in deep winter, options shrank fast, so they got creative. There's emerging evidence, though hotly debated, that Neanderthals may have fermented meat in pits, creating Ice Age jerky. If true, this would suggest forward planning and microbial knowledge well beyond what was previously assumed. Scholars still debate whether Neanderthals hunted large prey directly or scavenged from megafaunal kills. Either way, the calorie math was brutal. A mammoth could feed a clan for weeks, but bringing one down could also kill half the group. Your modern stomach, used to fiber and processed sugars, would likely revolt at this camp's menu. There's no bread, no seasoning, no balance, just heat, fat, and blood, sometimes human. But to live past the second day, you'd have to eat and fast. The snow outside may glitter, but within the Neanderthal camp, survival smells like wet fur, scorched hair, and ash. Every movement is deliberate because even the slightest mistake can cost a limb. Let's talk about cold. Not just discomfort, but the kind that invades the marrow. The kind that numbs fingers until they snap like brittle twigs. Hypothermia doesn't start with shivering. It starts with silence. Slow thinking, clumsy hands, death by degrees. Neanderthals fought this not just with fire, but with fur. Unlike modern humans, they couldn't sew with needles as we know them. Yet they fashioned garments, likely layered, using animal hides tied with sinew or leather thongs. Experimental archaeology suggests they scraped pelts with stone scrapers to soften them, then wrapped and tied the pieces around limbs, torsos, and feet. No fashion here, only function. Otzi the Iceman, though technically from a much later period, around 3300 BCE, was found wearing an ingenious multi-animal outfit: goat, bear, and deer. It gives us a clue. For early humans, clothing was not just about warmth, it was armor against extinction. Still, we don't fully understand how Neanderthals handled insulation. Scholars still debate whether they developed tailored clothing like Homo sapiens later did, or relied more on shelter and metabolic heat. Their body shape helps. Wide torsos, short limbs, and bulbous noses all conserve warmth better, traits known as Bergmann's and Allen's rules. But warmth alone wasn't enough. Tools mattered too, and tools meant hands. Archaeological studies from sites like Moula-Guercy in France show healed finger fractures, likely from tool use or defensive wounds. Repetitive tasks, like scraping hides, could lead to tendon damage, infection, and permanent disability. And then there's fire. It wasn't just heat, it was high-stakes technology. Flint napping throws sparks, but sustaining flame required dried moss, bark, or resin, precious in a snow-choked world. One gust of wind, one misplaced log, and the fire goes out. Reigniting it, that could take hours, maybe longer. Some researchers believe Neanderthals used manganese dioxide to lower the ignition temperature of kindling, a trick modern survivalists only recently verified. If true, it hints at a level of chemical insight we never attributed to them. But even then, smoke was both savior and threat, with no chimneys, cave interiors filled with it. Constant exposure likely damaged lungs, and in small shelters, carbon monoxide was a silent killer. You and your puffy jacket and Gore-Tex boots would be lost. Your gloves would freeze through. Your fingers would bleed trying to tie wet hide. Your breath would fog into ice on your lashes. And the fire, always greedy, would want more wood. The line between life and death in a Neanderthal winter camp wasn't defined just by hunger or cold. It was also drawn in bruises, breaks, and wounds that refused to heal. Pain was a constant companion, and sometimes, strangely, so was care. At the Shanidar cave in northern Iraq, archaeologists uncovered the skeleton of a Neanderthal male, now known as Shanidar I, dating back roughly 45 to 50,000 years. His story is etched in his bones: a crushed eye socket, a withered right arm, partial deafness, and signs of a limp, all injuries sustained long before death. And yet, he lived. Someone must have tended to him, fed him, protected him. This wasn't a fluke, it was community. But caring wasn't always gentle. A cracked rib or a fractured limb might be realigned with brute force or left to heal crooked. There were no splints, no antibiotics. Infection meant fever, fever meant hallucination, and often death. Still, evidence from La Chapelle-aux-Saints in France points to deliberate burials of the infirm, and even pollen deposits near skeletons that suggest the possibility, though debated, of herbal healing. Were Neanderthals using medicinal plants? We know Homo sapiens did. At El Cedron in Spain, plaque from a Neanderthal's teeth revealed traces of yarrow and chamomile, plants with little nutritional value but known medicinal properties. Coincidence? Scholars still debate whether this indicates intentional use or accidental ingestion. One quirky detail from the site: a healed skull with an indentation from blunt force trauma. The injury didn't kill the individual. What caused it is unknown. Was it a fall? A fight, a ritual? Maybe even an accident with a flint tool? In this world, there were no painkillers, no warm baths or rest days. A smashed finger meant reduced tool use. A twisted ankle could doom a hunt. Even minor injuries could spiral into catastrophic loss. And yet somehow they endured. Bodies recovered from Cima de los Huesos in Spain, dating back over 400,000 years, show long-term injuries that had clearly been survived. One partial skeleton belonged to a teenager with cranial deformities. That child had been cared for, perhaps for years. Imagine now stepping into this world with a sprained wrist, no doctor, no bandage, just the expectation that you keep moving or you're left behind. Pain to us is something to avoid. To a Neanderthal, it was background noise, and sometimes it was a bond, a way to prove loyalty or love. But if you cried out too loudly, something outside might hear you. The fire crackles low as dusk falls on the Neanderthal camp. But darkness isn't empty here, it's watching. Beyond the flickering light, the snow glows blue in the moonlight. And somewhere in that pale forest, something moves. To modern minds, winter can seem silent, peaceful. But for prehistoric humans, nightfall meant one thing: vulnerability. Predators ruled the darkness, and Neanderthals were not always at the top of the food chain. Cave hyenas were among the most fearsome threats. Bigger than modern hyenas, these powerful scavengers and hunters traveled in packs and likely smelled blood from miles away. Bones bearing their gnaw marks have been found in Neanderthal occupation sites like Goyet Cave in Belgium, sometimes mixed with human bones, cracked open the same way as those of prey animals. And then there were cave lions. These enormous felines, now extinct, were larger than African lions and adapted for icy climates, though debate continues over whether Neanderthals hunted them or merely avoided them. A 2023 discovery in Germany, a carved lion figurine from 51 years ago, suggests the animals were not only feared but revered. Yet the worst threats didn't always roar. There were stealthier killers: wolverines, bears roused from shallow hibernation, and the saber-tooths, long gone by Neanderthal time, had left behind a legacy of paranoia, passed down perhaps in campfire tales. One remarkable find from Bruniquel Cave in France reveals a circular structure made of broken stalagmites, dated to nearly 176,000 years ago. Was it a shelter, a ritual space, a defensive structure? Scholars still debate its purpose, but its existence suggests the need to create controlled enclosed spaces, even underground ones. Perhaps for protection from something outside, and still it was the cold that killed most efficiently. A Neanderthal who fell behind could freeze before a predator even approached, but the threat of being hunted kept groups close, fire burning, and sentries awake. The Neanderthal brain was wired for this: alert, reactive, and tuned to movement. We see this in their large occipital lobes, the area responsible for visual processing. Their eyes were adapted for low light, possibly even for spotting danger in moonlit snowfields. You, on the other hand, would flinch at every noise. Your depth perception would betray you in the shadows, and your fire, if left unattended, would fade to ember, then vanish. A rustle, a crunch of snow, not the wind. And suddenly you're not the hunter, you're the hunted.
The camp is quieter now. Fewer footprints in the snow. The fire still burns, but lower, more memory than blaze. Something is changing. Roughly 40,000 years ago, Neanderthals vanished. Not with a bang, not with a massacre, but with a slow, fading whisper across time. Their stone tools stopped appearing in new archaeological layers. Their burials ceased. And the Ice Age valleys they once ruled fell silent. Why? That question haunts paleoanthropology to this day. Climate instability is a key suspect. Around 42,000 years ago, Earth experienced what's known as the Loschamps event, a temporary reversal of the planet's magnetic field. During this period, radiation levels surged, temperatures fluctuated wildly, and weather patterns turned chaotic. Evidence from lakebed cores and tree rings shows signs of major ecological stress. Some researchers propose this magnetic flip may have disrupted Neanderthal hunting grounds and migration routes, scattering prey and fragmenting bands of survivors. But climate alone can't explain the full picture. Enter Homo sapiens. By the time Neanderthals were fading, anatomically modern humans were spreading across Europe. The archaeological record reveals a sudden shift in tool complexity, symbolic art and population density. Cave paintings in Chauvet and El Castillo dating back over 35,000 years show a new kind of mind, one that imagined gods, told stories and possibly saw itself as different. Yet there's evidence of overlap, perhaps even intimacy. At sites like Pestra Cuoas in Romania and Vindija Cave in Croatia, ancient DNA reveals something remarkable. Interbreeding. All non-African modern humans today carry 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA. We didn't just encounter them, we absorbed them. Still, not all contact was peaceful. Scholars still debate whether sapiens outcompete Neanderthals directly, via violence, resource hoarding, or cultural displacement, or whether the merging of populations simply diluted Neanderthal identity into obscurity. One fringe theory suggests disease played a role, illnesses carried by Homo sapiens to which Neanderthals had no immunity. Another proposes that Neanderthal birth rates, already low, couldn't keep up with mounting pressures. And then there's the most human tragedy of all, loneliness. As bands shrank, as mates became scarce, and as winter after winter rolled through abandoned valleys, perhaps the last Neanderthal simply sat by a fire that wouldn't catch. The final embers? No bones have been found from the last Neanderthal. No grave marked the end. But the archaeological silence is deafening. After dominating Ice Age Europe for hundreds of thousands of years, they were gone, and in their place, us. We carry their blood, their tools, their fear of the dark. But if you stepped into their world even for just 2 days, you'd never make it out.